people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Women's boxing champion Claressa Shields has been suspended in Michigan. Okay, we'll start with this. American boxer Claressa Shields, the undisputed champion in 3 weight classes, has been suspended and is under investigation after testing positive for marijuana following her victory over heavyweight Danielle Perkins in Michigan. The Michigan Unarmed Combat Commission suspended the 29-year-old athlete from competing in the state after an oral fluid sample taken after the fight on February 2nd showed the presence of marijuana, which is banned in competition by the World Anti-Doping Agency. I don't actually know that Claressa Shields smokes reefer, but if she doesn't, another possible explanation is Papoose. What about him? Because of the provisions and guidelines associated with being a world champion boxer, I don't know that Claressa actually smokes reefer, but I'm fairly confident Papoose does. So if they're backstage making out, getting hot and heavy, who's to say the fluid didn't come from him? Ms. Shields' conduct as a licensed professional boxer constitutes an immediate threat to the integrity of professional boxing, the public interest, and the welfare and safety of professional athletes, the Michigan Commission said on Thursday. Because she tested positive for trace amounts of weed? The World Boxing Organization, the WBO, which does not have the authority to suspend boxers, has requested a show cause letter from Shields to provide an explanation. The Michigan Commission is also conducting its own investigation to determine if disciplinary action is necessary. This is overkill. All this over trace amounts of reefer? Shields, the only boxer to hold every major title, WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO, in 3 weight classes and a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, took to her social media last week and posted, "Clean athletes win." Under the World Boxing Council Clean Boxing Program, both Shields and Perkins have been tested by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Agency, VADA. Different commissions around the country treat reefer, the presence of it in an athlete, in different ways. I know that in Texas, it's enough to get a fight ruled a no contest. That's what happened to Keyshawn Davis after he tested positive for reefer. That's also what happened to Philadelphia's own Liana Cruz. One of her fights was ruled a no contest for the same thing, both of which took place in the state of Texas, but this fight took place in Michigan. Claressa Shields took to her own social media and stated, "It's a temporary suspension till I go to trial for that very petite amount. I've never smoked weed." That's what I figured. I don't think Claressa smokes, but I think Papoose does. And if she was making out with him at any point before she was tested, that trace amount could have come from him. Lou Dembella, reacting to the news, said, "These effers in Michigan never suspended Alicia Baumgartner for testing positive for PEDs. Claressa Shields, they never provided any measure of justice or recourse to Christina Lenardatu, who was wronged. Last time I looked, weed wasn't a performance-enhancing drug. Suspending a local legend for trace weed, that was like a contact positive, is even more out of line. It's scandalous in light of how Michigan fails to police ped use." I have to agree with Lou. To some extent I do that. Look, in the spirit of objectivity, I am not a fan of Claressa Shields. I'm actually more a fan of Alicia than Claressa. But if you were going to suspend anybody, wouldn't it have been Alicia? She actually did test positive for a performance-enhancing drug. Didn't she prove her innocence? I don't know all the details. I don't know all the particulars. All I do know is that when that entire fiasco was going on, Alicia was never once suspended for it. That's what I do know. A suspension never came down, which is likely why she was never stripped of any of her alphabet titles. Because without that suspension, the alphabets may not have the precedent to strip a fighter of their title. Not if the suspension doesn't come first. Then what are you stripping them for? As far as the commission's concerned, they didn't do nothing. Alicia didn't. And Alicia was not suspended for that performance-enhancing drug fiasco, whereas this ain't a ped. Weed? I'm not saying that they should have suspended Alicia. I'm saying, if you didn't bother her, why are you bothering Claressa? That is, why are you so much more Johnny on the spot with Claressa? Did Claressa piss somebody off over there? Is that what it is? And this is their way of getting her back? Her sparkling personality. This all seems a bit much, and they're so Johnny on the spot with it. In the event that they actually do suspend Claressa, I don't think it's much of a hindrance. I don't, because I'm not even sure that she was going to fight again this year, since there's virtually nobody else up there to fight at heavyweight. There's that to consider, the state at the weight, and the duration of time a suspension might last. They'll give you a year, but then dumb it down to 6 months if you cooperate with an anti-doping protocol. And it's your first offense. Which this would be for Claressa. In the event that happens, she could be back by September or October. She could be back one more time before this year is out, having served a potential suspension. If one is handed down, I'm not sure that it will. If the WBO so elects to relieve Claressa Shields of her newly obtained WBO title, well, that's not saying much, because I don't think she was going to stay up there anyway. At heavyweight. Because there's nobody up there to fight anyway. She might have spent the remainder of this year boiling down to, say, 168, maybe even 160. Maybe. That's why I'm not sure she was even going to fight again this year, and if she were going to, I don't think it was going to be at heavyweight. The whole thing seems like overkill to me. Much ado about nothing, or next to nothing. Trace amounts of reefer? And I don't even like Claressa Shields. I am not a fan of her, but they're doing way too much over a little bit of weed. That, based on their findings, wasn't even her own. The amount of weed they found in her system, trace amounts, it's not in keeping with recreational use or somebody who smokes weed on a regular basis. It's basically making a mountain out of a molehill. Men's junior middleweight news ahead of this weekend's big Saudi card. Virgil Ortiz wants to become a throwback fighter against Israel Madrimov. Ortiz's attitude is refreshing. Getting most of the sport's young stars to take risky fights in today's current climate is nearly impossible. Ortiz cares about the legacy he will leave behind after he hangs up the gloves, and wants to be remembered as a fighter who took on the biggest and baddest challenges. He spoke to Boxing Scene about why he has taken such a different approach. I mean, where do I get it from? I'm just a very competitive person by nature, Ortiz said. You know, we've been asking for a lot of these big fights, and sometimes I'll get criticism that I'm not fighting anyone, but it's because I wasn't getting the fights, you know? There have been many times where I could have fought someone, hypothetically, like Keith Thurman. We were going to fight him at one point, but it just didn't happen, so, of course, I get bummed out because I'm thinking I'm not getting my shot. But these opportunities are coming at me, so I'm going to take every single one that I can. And like I said, I just want to fight the best. I want to prove that I'm the best, and I want to win. Heading into his clash with former champion Madrimov, Ortiz feels like he still has things to prove. This is a genuinely tough fight to edge, but here's the silver lining. Here's the saving grace. What is it? That even if Virgil Ortiz were to lose this weekend, all the doors aren't going to close on him. Look at Zhilei Zhang. He lost the Joseph Parker fight, but he was right back in the mix with the Deontay Wilder fight and right back in the winner's bracket, and he's going to be fighting this weekend. That if Virgil were to lose this weekend, it's not the end of the world, and that doesn't mean every door is going to close in his face. Yeah, you know, there's still some doubt, I guess, in terms of coming back from my illness this year, or whatever he said, but you know what? I feel like I proved it by going 12 rounds with someone like Buatsi. Not only that, but to prove that I'll fight anybody. You know, we had a lot of other fights lined up before this one, and some of them got approved. And they were all good fighters as well. I just want to show everyone that I'm here to fight the best. I want to be like the good old days where you go on HBO, and I just want to be one of those legendary fighters that people go back and see 10 years from now. Saturday's bout, however, won't be the first time that Madrimov and Ortiz have squared off in a ring. So this was for the Egidijus Kavaliauskas fight in 2021 at the Summit. I sparred with Madrimov, Ortiz recalled. I also sparred with Subriel Matias, and the sparring sessions were really good. I feel like we both kind of learned a lot from each other. We've never been in a ring with each other before or after that, but just based off of those sparring sessions, I think this is gonna be a good fight. Madrimov staked a claim as one of the best fighters in the junior middleweight division with his performance against Crawford. The WBA champion, then champion, took the undefeated Crawford to the wire, and many believed that the Uzbek had done enough to ensure the victory, though Crawford was awarded a narrow, unanimous decision.
Narrow? Who thought Madrimov won?
Angry Spence fans that are still mad Terrence kicked the crap out of him. I thought he did really good, if I'm being honest. Ortiz said of Madrimov's performance, he did really well, and I'm gonna be honest, he did a lot better than I thought he was gonna do. And did I think he deserved the win? I mean, I think Crawford got the best out of him, but I don't think he should be ashamed of it because that was a really good fight.
And this one's gonna be this clash of styles.
Virgil Ortiz is a pressure fighter. Israel Madrimov is a boxer-puncher. The caveat that Virgil's got a lot more fights and a lot more rounds than Israel, more pro experience in the paid ranks, so that sort of evens the playing field.
That Israel has the right base style for the job, but perhaps not enough rounds. Perhaps not enough experience.
The silver lining, whoever wins this weekend, I anticipate they're going to put a lot of pressure on Sebastian after that, and somebody needs to, because it feels like he's been holding those two alphabet titles hostage since he won them last year in the Tim Tszyu upset.
He's going to be defending them very soon against Cordell Booker, a hand-picked opponent.
But after this weekend, whoever wins, whether it's Virgil or Israel, I think immediately after that, the winner's gonna push for their title shot, and Sebastian will be forced to oblige them.
Forced to comply.
I still can't make up my mind as to who is going to win this weekend's fight.
That's what makes the fight so good. The outcome is not a foregone conclusion. There's a credible argument on either side. But at some point, I'm gonna have to make a decision.
Just not here and now. Elsewhere on the undercard of that same show, Callum Smith's trainer reveals why he's confident the Liverpool boxer will beat Joshua Buatsi. McGirt backs Smith for a big performance. Despite his setback against Artur Beterbiev, Callum Smith's trainer, Buddy McGirt, is extremely confident that his fighter will deliver on fight night, saying, "We've had incredible sparring and his whole mental well-being is so much better than what it was for the Beterbiev fight. I know he's gonna turn it on."
Well, it's not uncommon for trainers to make big promises ahead of a fight.
But as it pertains to trainers and who's in the corner, I do like Callum Smith's corner more than Joshua Buatsi's, more than Virgil Hunter. And I can remember some time ago when that partnership was first formed, we were expecting big things from Joshua Buatsi, and in a very general sense, we've been expecting big things from him because of his amateur background, because he was an Olympian, but we haven't seen that yet.
So when he brought on Virgil as his corner, Virgil, who achieved notoriety for training Andre Ward,
had the whole star trainer thing going on during Andre Ward's run at super middleweight and light heavyweight, but we can't say that he extended that same success to any of the other fighters that he's trained.
We can't say that he's now doing with Joshua Buatsi what he was doing with Andre Ward, whereas Buddy...
Call me crazy, but I like Buddy McGirt a bit more than I like Virgil Hunter. Buddy McGirt, who said, mentally and physically, believe me, his vibe is so much different for this fight. It's like when I first met him and started training him.
He used to train Yanni Beck Kanalai too.
And you will notice that since Yanni Beck left Buddy McGirt for Brian Valoria, he hasn't really looked impressive in a while now, has he?
But he's a good trainer.
Buddy McGirt has trained Callum Smith since his loss to Canelo and has seen him work his way to the top of the light heavyweight division, with only the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol standing in his way for a title.
Only 2 losses to Canelo Alvarez and Artur Beterbiev. There's no shame in losing to them, especially when Joshua Buatsi is no Artur Beterbiev.
While Callum Smith has been full of respect for Joshua Buatsi, he has suggested that the former WBA super middleweight champion George Groves, whom he defeated in 2018, was a tougher opponent than Buatsi will be.
How's that work?
We can say that the George Groves that Callum Smith fought way back there in 2018 was at minimum a more experienced fighter than Joshua Buatsi is now. Joshua Buatsi has never even fought for a full alphabet title,
where George Groves was a reigning champion.
Buatsi, however, believes he is the one stepping up to the toughest challenge of his career. Smith's belief that Buatsi is not his toughest test could prove to be his downfall, though Buatsi has been criticized over his career for his hot and cold performances. I haven't been impressed by Joshua Buatsi in a while. He won his last fight against Willie Hutchinson. Didn't blow me away in the process.
I don't think I've been impressed by anything Joshua Buatsi has done since the Ricard Bolotniks fight, and that was a while ago.
He did beat Craig Spider Richards. He did beat him by the skin of his teeth. That's saying that it wasn't an overly ambitious performance or an emphatic one. He just did enough. Did enough to win the fight. Did enough to beat him.
The hour is drawing closer. I've got to make a decision.
Wouldn't stake my reputation on forecasting the outcomes of any of these fights because many of them are tough to call, save the Stevenson versus Padley fight. That's the only one where the outcome is obvious. The rest of them could go either way. But at the same time, what's the point in straddling the fence? Like a rec center party, the real fun is on the dance floor. There's no sense in going if you're just going to be a wallflower, and so I'm going to go with Callum Smith.
The reason for it?
I think Callum Smith is a lot more seasoned than Joshua Buatsi, and I understand that he has his losses and his limitations, but they don't seem to be things that Joshua Buatsi brings to the table. The guys that give Callum the most problems are the persistent guys, the pressure guys, the inside fighters, and Joshua Buatsi isn't much of an inside fighter.
Like a John Ryder, like a Canelo, like an Artur Beterbiev.
Those are inside fighters, persistent ones, where Joshua Buatsi, his best punches are his straight punches when he can get full extension on the arm.
The caveat.
You could say the exact same thing about Callum Smith, except he's got more height and more length than Joshua Buatsi, that if you give him room to get full extension on the arm, he can generate devastating power, more, I think, than Joshua Buatsi.
What he did to Lenin Castillo, what he did to Matthew Bowder-Leak, and what he did to the last guy that he fought.
I've gotten more highlight reel knockouts from Callum Smith at light heavyweight than what I've gotten from Joshua Buatsi. I happen to think he's a harder puncher.
Though it doesn't all boil down to power.
What tipped the scales for me is the distance at which the fight is being fought. I don't trust Joshua Buatsi to smother Callum Smith on the inside like John Ryder did, like Canelo did, like Artur did. I don't trust that Joshua Buatsi's going to do that because he ain't that kind of guy, and he doesn't have much of a work rate anyway.
Talked about that on a good number of occasions.
Which I suspect is a byproduct of a poor engine. The reason he doesn't do more is because he doesn't want to blow his load. He's more of a finesse, fence, and fiddle kind of guy than a gutting and gritty inside fighter.
And I think I saw him gas out. I think I saw him get tired towards the end of his last fight, the Willie Hutchinson fight.
I don't know about his chin either. I'm not going to say he's chinny, but he hasn't been chin-checked. Who's the biggest puncher that Joshua Buatsi ever fought?
I mean, at least with Callum, we have a better idea what he can take, what he can withstand, that for the most part he's durable. It took Artur Beterbiev to stop him.
Joshua Buatsi is no Artur Beterbiev. I don't trust him to get it on and get at it.
So I'm going with Callum.
If Joshua Buatsi is better than what I've seen so far, he's got to show me. If there's more to him, he's got to show me, because right now it's looking to me like Callum's going to beat him.
I'm going to go with Callum Smith by way of knockout.
Knockout?
I think that Joshua Buatsi, because he's not going to smother Callum, Callum will have room to get the arm out.
Generate that devastating power from the outside and mid-range to inside. He's got a halfway decent catch and counter left hook. If he lands on Joshua, I think he gets him out of there. So I'm going with Callum by way of knockout. Mid to late.